Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Field Service webinar, The Future of Field Service, How Technology Accelerates Service Value by Connecting Physical, Digital, and Human Worlds. Thank you all for joining us. Before we begin, I'd like to bring your attention to the console in front of you. All the windows you see can be repositioned, maximized, or minimized to fit the device you're using to connect with us today. If you accidentally minimize a window, don't worry. Simply pop into the toolbar at the bottom of your screen to bring it back up. On that same toolbar, you'll find the Resource Center. In that center, you can access documents related to this webinar content, as well as important info about the next field service event happening in sunny Palm Springs, California, from April 21st to 24th. Feel free to download the agenda or the attendee list, and if you like what you see, email us at webinar@wbresearch.com to find out how to register. I'd now like to introduce you to our speakers today. We have Michael Mendoza, the Field Service Practice Lead at Hitachi Solutions America, and Dmitry Slavkovic, the Pre-Sales Technical Specialist at PTC. We're going to save some time at the end of today's discussion for an audience Q&A, so feel free to submit questions for Michael and Dmitry at any time during the presentation using the Q&A portal on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Now, without further ado, I'm going to hand things over to Michael. Take it away.
That's great. Thank you, Lena. Good morning, all. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever in the world you are. I want to say thank you, first of all, for spending some time with us to kind of get some ideas around the future of field service. For most of you, hopefully, you've had the opportunity to meet us through the series of webinars that we've been doing. This particular webinar really is, the third step, if you will, in this webinar series that we've been running. You're welcome to reach out to us. Should you not have seen those webinars, we're happy to send that information out to you. Phase one was really more around the building blocks of connecting pieces of equipment, understanding and synchronizing that data and putting context to that. Phase two was really around moving that into more of insight-driven and action-driven kind of information and being able to take context, apply that against your ingestion areas around the data, and being able to begin to take action around that. Phase three, which is what we're talking about now in this webinar, is really about being able to take all that pre-setup information, that baseline information, that data, and being able to then now say, how can I act on that? How does that become valuable? And how does that insight then set me up really for what I want to do next? And based on kind of where the market is going, where field service is going, the market dynamics, the things that are happening in that industry, which we're going to cover today, how does that set me up for the future of field service? That said, our focus today is really to kind of take those three areas, and this is really more of a bit of a reminder about kind of the things that we want to make sure we cover here. Is how you take and how do you find that intersection where data such as IoT information, telemetry information, PLM information becomes something that you're able to then establish as, okay, this is my baseline. And then from there, you're also then able to generate insight from that data, right? From that information, from taking that data, turning it into actionable insights, and from here, being able to say, okay, now I can either enable both my humans, my technicians. I can basically create a scenario and situations where I can do certain things and start to innovate my service model so that I can then take advantage of this information. So hopefully, as you see that today, as we go through the webinar today, you'll see these steps kind of progress. And then hopefully at the end, as a takeaway, you'll see some key things that we are seeing in the industry through our experience, both from the baseline information and the baseline platform that our customers are starting to enable, as well as the innovative ways in which they're taking this into the future of what they're looking to do. By way of background, our Hitachi Solutions, I lead the field service practice. And we've been in this industry for a while. One of the things that we definitely see through the course of our experience now is that in the past, call it 5 years, the level of innovation that we are seeing in the industry has been astronomical. It's probably the most exciting time to be in field service because of the fact that, both from a data perspective, machine learning, AI, augmented reality, which we're going to talk about today, just becomes something that our customers begin to consume, and that's leading us to really interesting business models. Our focus, I'm part of the manufacturing practice as well inside Hitachi Solutions. What informs a lot of our conversation is the fact that we get involved in the manufacturing space. We get involved from end-to-end business units inside a manufacturing kind of organization. So that involves sales, whether that be more of a service, whether that be more of an infrastructure play. The idea, though, is that once we are having these conversations, is we're seeing the connectivity, we're seeing how the dots are kind of connecting within organizations, and we're able to help our customers and our end users basically be able to say, okay, this is your, the next step in the evolution of your service model. A little bit around more of that, what that looks like from a solution perspective, and a little bit more what that looks like from an organization perspective. The end-to-end perspective here is really what's really important, in the sense that we understand how you go from operations, from processes, intelligence, and innovation, and how these are connected all the way through. So let's take a look at the future of field service. We want to just kind of start off with kind of how do we get there? What are the things that we're seeing with our customers? We also want to discuss a little bit around kind of more best practices, how we're seeing kind of the ones that are most successful as they move their service organization forward, and what are the things that we're seeing as patterns over and over again. The simplest way that we see, breaking down what are the key areas that we need to consider when we think about the future of service or the future of field service, right? So from an operations perspective, optimizing equipment, understanding the connectivity requirements, and then the data that's coming in from those, whether that be parts or consumables or different kind of perspectives around the telemetry information around that machine. We actually have a lot of customers today basically starting at this level and normalizing this data, contextualizing this data, and then that then feeds into process, right? So basically understanding, okay, what are we doing with that data? How does that feed in to our workflows, our organizational processes? Who's involved? Who touches this information? And who gets, who handles the steps, and who basically makes sure they're synchronized all throughout the organization. And then that then, leads into, okay, given the understanding of the data and the processes that, we have, how is that then impacting our current business models? And also then, how do we then consider that so that we can understand how to take this to a new business model, right? So hopefully you'll see that this is pretty intuitive. This is kind of a way that we always have, and the way that we shape and form our conversations as we kind of move into this space and help people understand, okay, the future of field service is this way. What is the best way for me to position myself so I'm kind of heading in that trajectory? I want to spend just a minute just kind of talking about examples of customers that we've seen. We're actually going to talk about some live examples of customers of ours that are, in this space today. So for example, a jet engine manufacturer that sells, instead of selling jet engines, talking about maximum availability and uptime. A building controls manufacturer who normally sells just, thermostat controls, electrical controls, are moving into building as an uptime and selling things like, building efficiency to building operators. A printer manufacturer, we're going to see an example of this, selling output as a service. So they used to sell printers. Now they're selling performance. They're selling the number of pages delivered, right, to their customers. So we'll see an example of that today. And there's a whole bunch of other things that are happening here in this industry, which is really kind of driving our customers towards this outcome-based model. What we see is what's happening in the industry, a couple of interesting things. We see kind of, organizations that are kind of starting to move down this model, are seeing kind of best-in-class organizations, are seeing definite improvements both on an internal productivity perspective as well as being able to then turn those into service models that are driving new revenue and competitive advantage. A connected field service, but technician productivity, the human side of this, is also really important. A lot of investment both on a Microsoft platform for field service around technology enablement. We'll see augmented reality today and how that plays in, are all important parts of why customers are moving to an outcome-based service. One thing that we find that's really important is that what's driving the initial piece and the initial kind of market insights and market dynamics that's driving kind of organizations towards looking at different ways to move their service organization is very simply put. These charts are both from McKinsey. I thought it was really interesting to share because I think for most manufacturers, you're seeing this exact kind of dynamic take place. On the left, we're seeing that both from obviously competition, the market competition, but we're also seeing kind of price erosion, margin erosion happening through to commoditization of the products, right? So depending on where it's being made, it's being sold cheaper. One of our customers, the example I'm going to show you today, this is a definite market, trend that they're seeing. Their ability to price above market, their ability to, get a premium price for their product is slowly eroding, and of course, that's showing up in their margins. What they're seeing then is because this model of the manufacturing kind of arena changing is really changing the way they need to view their service model. So they were looking at a traditional service model, break-fix model. Now they're moving to an outcome-based model, right? And that's really kind of where that value that they're looking to capture is now in that, call it higher tier of service, more of an outcome-based, more of a, step-through based model rather than, pure kind of, let's just say, call it traditional break-fix model. The magic that they're able to actually do with most of our customers, and really where we see the most value, is they're applying the concept of, new use cases, right? IoT use cases, whether augmented reality cases, in many different parts of their business, so that they're looking at, hey, the most complex pieces of equipment, we're doing certain IoT use cases, augmented reality cases, but we're also applying that to the traditional parts of our business. And in fact, again, from McKinsey here, they're seeing that, for customers, for most organizations that are applying multiple use cases across their value chain, the more use cases they're applying, the more successful they are because they're both either, investigating, assessing, researching, exploring how those kind of use cases actually apply to their business model and where it's driving benefit. We're going to see an example of that as we move forward here. This is probably one of the classic examples of RollsRoyce. And for those of us that know this story, this is one of those incredible stories around outcome-based and the future of service. So, for majority of their lives, RollsRoyce has been creating jet engines and manufacturing jet engines. And what they've been doing is, the traditional model, right, which is basically we sell the engine. At some point along the line of that curve, we get parts, right? We get service, we get warranty work, we get break-fix work, the kind of traditional service model. One of the things they found is that in the market, the Rolls-Royce, this is back in about late 90s, they weren't being viewed as competitive with their peers, especially when it came to reliability. So they were kind of, not really making the grade, and it was a competitive disadvantage, and they had to do something in order to break that mold. What they did is they created this program called the Total Care Program, right? And what it is really is ultimately hey, you buy the engine, but we will basically just guarantee uptime. Right? We'll take care of all the parts. We'll make sure we are, have the right technician there at the right time. We're going to take a predictive model to our break-fix model. We're going to apply a predictive model to that. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, basically we want to make sure that you're always running. Our SLA is it's always up, and then we take care of everything. You leave it all to us. That's basically what it is. And in the 2000s, and what's interesting is in 2000, about less than 14% of their engines they had less than 14% market share of their engines. 2018, they had about 35. In the 2000, they had 10% of their engines on the total care package. Now it's more than 90%. And then you guys can read the rest. One of the most, really impressive things with this is that they've, through the total care program, they've seen roughly about exceeding £1 per share of free cash flow. That's what it has generated for them, primarily because they've moved to this model of, instead of break fix, this traditional fix, they moved to this defining an outcome, accomplishing a business outcome from their products, and basically guaranteeing that that's what they're going to be able to do from the customer standpoint. So that's a simple example. Let's go ahead and kind of take a look at, how does that play into, what are the core components? And what we wanted to do is just actually show you a couple of different pieces of that feature of service. I'm going to start off with showing you kind of more of an IoT-centric kind of example, but we thought we would show you an example from an actual existing customer. So the connected value chain here is really around, moving it from things, from insights to actions. And what I'm going to, show you here is that all of this would basically be showing up in the technology stack. And that stack really kind of looks like this. From understanding, the first step here is understanding, where you are in your landscape, whether it be more in the edge intelligence level, whether you're looking at more of a network connectivity level. Right now, when we spend a lot of time on the edge and network connectivity kind of concepts in the past couple of webinars, our focus right now is really more on that data management, actionable insight, and leading right into service management. So, given that we're going to cover a couple of key scenarios for you today. We're going to start with an IoT Connected machine insights, and this is really coming out of an existing customer of ours. This is a customer that we worked with, and this is more moving from a traditional. We produce the piece of equipment, we sell it. This is that RollsRoyce example where we sell it, and then we hopefully we get some consumables out of it, and we get basically parts, and we service it through moving it to more of a consumable, meaning it basically we're replenishing consumables automatically. We're making sure it's uptime, and we're kind of guaranteeing output. And then what I'm going to show you is really how does that take place? What are the kind of core components of that? We're going to move into our partner, PTC here. Nature is going to show us an AR kind of empowered kind of technicians. And this is really about using augmented reality, taking that data, taking that, again, one step further, and basically, showing you how that could look in an augmented reality kind of capacity. And then one last use case that we would just want to build on as well is taking your data and taking insights and taking action and being able to kind of apply that to a use case that, something that we see very much in around, forecasting, predicting, and being able to use those forecasts and predictions to run your business. So I'm going to get us started here with our IoT Connected. What you're looking at is a dashboard that we basically are using with one of our customers, Lexmark. They built this with us. This is a part of a showcase that we're showing in the Microsoft Technology Centers here in the United States. I think right now it's in 5 technology centers. And it's really an example of the power of kind of data, IoT, connectivity. And what we wanted to show you is just a little bit of a slice of kind of the level of information. We've had to kind of, condense what we can show you here simply because of there's data here that there's a lot. And just for the purpose of kind of being able to show you some core concepts around where they're going and what they're doing, we thought we'd just give you a bit of a, condensed view of this kind of experience. What we're looking at is just a simple dashboard. Essentially, these are all Lexmark's customers and their campuses and the office buildings that the printers are in. And here what they're seeing, simply put, are just, kind of different locations, whether or not there's alarms, whether or not there's, thresholds being broken, and whether or not it's just simple operating conditions coming in from their printers. Their printers are effectively, if you can think about it, their printers are effectively, broadcasting this information to them, and they are having the ability to kind of go ahead and see at a pretty detailed level, which pieces of equipment are sending that, and they actually have the ability to kind of go ahead and drill down onto what that equipment is sending them. Right here, they can say, I can go down, and if I was looking at this, if I'm an operations manager and my customer, for example, is Microsoft, and I'm responsible for all their buildings, and I'm managing the performance of each one of these printers, I can actually go drill down, and I can go ahead and go into a regional view, or whether that be geographic view, whatever the case may be. And here, if you can see, we're moving down to more of a campus or office building level. And here we're looking at, total alarms and anomalies. We're looking at, current readings. We're looking at consumption. We're looking at consumables and their status. All of this becomes just simple data that's being pulled out and being brought in to my kind of experience. So now once we move in, we can kind of see to a specific building. We can kind of see a specific device. We can go ahead and even drill this down to the specific printer. Right? So for a simple scenario like this, where you're looking to understand the global kind of view, you're understanding kind of which printers are setting alarms, which assets, what the performance of each asset is. And what's more important here is that as you're seeing here, this is really just looking at thresholds, alarms, potentially anomalies. But what this is also feeding, if you look at the very bottom, is our toner level sensors, our drive sensors, is this is now feeding into a predictive model, which is saying, right, based on these current readings, we are anticipating that, you're going to need to either replace some consumables, so send it to them automatically, or you're going to have to replace a part, which potentially would be requiring a technician to go there, or you can actually send them the part, or that's something they can put in themselves with your assistance, using things like remote support and potentially augmented reality as well. So this is just an example of a scenario here where we're helping a customer move from more of that break fix to more of this kind of predictive, telemetry-driven, data-driven model of service. And this is also how they're basically creating a scenario and where they're positioning themselves to anticipate when parts are going to be needed, consumables are going to be needed, inventory is going to be needed. So just a quick example for that. And what we're going to do now is we're going to move into the augmented reality kind of scenario that we wanted to show you. And Dimitri's going to walk us through that for a couple of minutes. Dimitri?
All right, thank you. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. All right. So, what I'll be doing today is just going through a quick demonstration of our augmented reality software called Vuforia Studio. And so what I'll do first is start off by showing you one of these finished experiences on my iPad. So open up the Vuforia View app. And so Vuforia View app, free apps that you can have on your tablet or wearable device or your phone. And it is free to download. So after this call, if you do want to mess around with a few AR experiences, you can download this for free, and you'll be able to play around with these experiences you see right here. But I'll go ahead and open up our milling machine AR experience. And so the way we set it up is with the home screen, and from this home screen, you can obviously go into different sections here. So we have training, manufacturer changeover, service, and part identification. And for this demo purpose, I'll go ahead and focus on the service side of it. So this is a visual target. All I have to do is point my camera at a horizontal surface. And once that locks on, it'll go ahead and place my CAD data. And there we are. And so you could also do a model target. And so a model target would be overlaying this digital CAD over top of an actual Grizzly machine. But this is a spatial target, so it's just simply the digital information in your physical environment. So with this, we can scale, we can zoom in and zoom out. And we'll go ahead and do that. So we can zoom in, we can zoom out, we could also rotate it easily, and it will stay in place. So if I want to walk around and see what's going on with the back of my equipment, I can easily do so. Now what I'll do here is I'll go ahead and select this hotspot. This will pull up a troubleshooting guide in case the motor overheats, which will walk you through a few steps here. And once you've read through the guide, you can press continue, and this will pull up the AR animations that will run us through this service operation. So on the bottom, you can see we have a rewind and a play button. We also have a freeze button in case we want to pause in the middle of an animation. And then on the far right is just a, we call it a chalk button, which takes us into another application, which is assistance. So maybe someone still gets stuck as they're going through this. They can use that to remote in an expert. I'll go ahead and we'll start walking through. So first we'll disconnect the mill from the power. Next we'll locate the cap on the motor housing. And we'll go ahead and replace our springs. And then we'll just turn this to tighten the cap. And so that was quickly just an example of what a finished experience may look like. And so the demo I have prepared here, we do have CAD data on that specific milling machine I showed you there. So I'm just going to show you how we would actually build this experience out. What I'm showing you won't be obviously the finished experience, but it will at least give you a good idea of how the process works and what Vuforia Studio looks like. So here we'll start a new project. So we can select whether we want to do it for eyewear or for a mobile device. We'll just go ahead and select mobile device. And we'll call it milling machine service. So this brings us into the Vuforia Studio interface. You guys can see on the far left here, I'll just quickly go through connections. So we have, theme editor, pretty basic. For experiences, we can choose to have a thing mark associated with experience. If you want to create something like what I just showed you on the iPad, we would just select none. But if you wanted to pull those experiences up by scanning a QR code, PTC's branded QR code, we call those thing marks, you would select thing mark association. Then here we can validate our experience service as well as require authentication. So you can make this available to the general public or just between, specific technicians or your team internally. Then we can set to have this for a phone or a tablet, and we can enable a navigation. But before we actually start building this out in Studio, what we're going to go into first is Creo Illustrate. And so Illustrate is packaged with Studio, and this is where we actually create the animations that you saw. So the stuff you saw on the iPad with the screwdriver coming in, this is where we actually build that out. And then once we have all our animations completed, we'll publish this as a PVZ file, we'll pull back into Studio, and we'll continue building it out from there. But here, just to start, you can see on the far left, we're working with our bill of materials, so it makes it pretty easy to create the animations you're looking for. I won't go as in-depth as we did on the iPad, but I will just show you quickly a few things we can do. So first, we'll bring attention to the power cable. Next, maybe we'll want to bring attention to the bolt we're trying to unscrew. So I'll go ahead and select here. We'll go back to effects, and then we'll select flash just to bring attention to this part as well. But for step 3, what we'll do is we'll go back to our bill of materials and we'll import a screwdriver. And so I'll select from the effects, fade in, and then I'll create the animation here. And then finally, to finish off the step, we'll select both the bolt and the screwdriver, and we'll have those fade out. And now you can have as many steps as you'd like. You can have multiple service instructions, but when you have, what you're looking for, so we can preview what we made, we can actually go ahead and publish this out. And again, I said PVZ file. PVZ stands for Product View Zip File, and that is the file we will be pulling into Vuforia Studio. So going back into Studio, first I'll place a spatial target, and then I'll drag and drop a model on top. And then from Properties on the right, I can go into my resources and then select the file that we just published. I'll go ahead and run the CAD optimizer. And all that's doing is lightening up the model if you have something that's pretty large, and it gives you a high, medium, and low resolution version of that model. So if your experience starts to get a little too large, you do have the options of kind of lowering that resolution. And then I'll select Figure 2, since that was the name of the animation we just created. But how do we actually get this to play? So I'll quickly show you guys how we build out a rewind and a play button. So first I'll lay down my grid layout. And I am creating a rewind and a play button, so maybe I'll add a column. I'll center the alignment there. And then you'll see on the left here, we have all these different widgets that are readily available, so you're not having to develop these. These are ready to be used. I'll simply drag and drop this toggle button onto my panels. And then I can select an image either from my computer or from the drop-down menu. The drop-down menu does include plenty of images for different buttons, labels, and gauges. We also have CS built right in this, so if we want to style or color our buttons, it is very easy to do. And then I'll just go ahead and drag this clicked button onto our model, and you'll see we have a few differences we can select from. We are creating a rewind button, so I'll bind this rewind service to the button. And then we'll do the same thing for the play button. I'll go through a little bit quicker here. We'll select our image. Run some CSS. We'll drag this clicked event onto the model, and then instead of selecting rewind, obviously here we'll go ahead and select play. So at this point, we don't have quite what I showed you on the iPad, but if I did publish this, we would at least be able to play through and rewind through those 3 steps that we did create. Now, the part I do want to show you is how we would potentially include IoT data. And so on the 3D canvas, we also have widgets available, just like we did with the 2D canvas. Here, trying to bring in IoT data, we usually drag and drop this 3D gauge onto the canvas. And so position this where I want. And once that's where I'm looking, we can actually go ahead and connect up some data. So on the far right, you'll see external data, and then there is a green plus sign. And so this will take us into TC's IoT platform, which is called ThingWorks. And from there, we can find our set that we're looking for, so specifically our milling machine. And we can drag and drop one of these properties right in to the application. And then all I have to do is drag and drop the temperature property right on the text box or onto the gauge itself. So at this point, we can preview it. So I'll select an iPad, so it's a little easier for everyone to see. And quickly go through these steps here. So that is the AR our demonstration we had today. Hopefully give you a better idea of, how Vuforia Studio looks and how we would build something like this out. Remember, you need CAD data to build this out. And that's pretty much all I have on my side. So I will pass it back if there's no other questions.
That's great.
Michael, do you want to?
Dimitri.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Dimitri. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
And really, what we wanted to establish there is that we are using things such as IoT and telemetry information, and from there we're saying, okay, we can go move our service into more of an augmented reality kind of scenario and introduce that into our service model. And one of the most interesting and probably the most biggest value drivers is how Dimitri at the end there, took a model, right, and then added IoT information into it, right, and then being able to do that easily because we've done kind of the, let's call it the plumbing, if you will, right, writing that, second step where all that data was contextualized, all the, alerts were contextualized. So now it's able to drive things such as an augmented reality scenario like this that Dimitri showed, and you're able to then leverage that both, whether it be to empower technicians, which is kind of what we are kind of showing here, or even, if you want to, publish that kind of information towards more of a customer-facing, more of a partner-facing. Right? We have customers that do that where they're publishing kind of AR information complete with IoT information into their dealer channel, for example. That helps their dealers basically be able to, be more proactive, understand what's happening with the pieces of equipment that they're supposed to be servicing soon, and have that kind of view and enabling their technicians to do better work. That was great. Thank you, Dimitri. So also wanted to just move to another scenario that I think is also really, a lot simpler in a way, but also a lot in many ways we find this is a scenario that, this is a use case that a lot of our customers get value from. So this is an existing customer of ours, and if you imagine that, what this customer does is they basically manage a fleet of trucks and drivers, and they go out and fill up oil tanks, right, in different buildings. So malls, imagine malls for their generators and for their heaters. Oil kind of change kind of areas and outlets. They basically go ahead and send out these massive trucks full of oil, right? And drivers run around the entire country, and basically they have a route that they go ahead and they replenish oil. Traditionally, what these drivers used to do, which I love this scenario, where the drivers used to go and drive their route, get out of the truck, and literally kick the tank, like kick the fuel tank or the oil tank, and then from kicking it and from the sound that it makes, they're able to determine, okay, this needs some oil, this needs about roughly 40 liters or 500 liters, whatever the value is. Then they go ahead and fill up that oil. Right? So that's how they've been doing business for decades. Right? And it's really, they go in, they fill up the oil, they send the bill to the customer, say, okay, we added 40 liters or 500 liters, whatever the case may be, and then off they go. What we help them do is move to a predictive model where we are actually using telemetry information, using IoT information. We're actually measuring that oil inside those tanks. And what's happening is we are actually predicting when that oil is going to need replenishment up to the point of the day of, or, the week of that oil needing kind of replenishment, because we're measuring things like the rate at which oil is being consumed. We're also doing things like what's the temperature outside, because that's going to define, how much oil that building is going to need for their heaters and whatnot. And what that IoT information does is that actually feeds their scheduling engines. And what that'll do then is the truck routes are automatically being created based on how much oil each tank is predicted to need during that week. So what that means is then the routes are being created so that the trucks are moving around the country. They have, 500 liters, 900 liters of oil, and their routes are being created based on IoT data. And what it's doing is saying, okay, for the first one, you're going to need to replenish 20 liters, 900 liters the next one, 1,000 liters the next one. But the idea is that by the time they are done with that route, they are completely moved all the oil. The truck is empty, and now they can go back home. And what this has done for them is, what I like is that obviously this, reduces things like travel time, carbon footprint, all those kind of discernible ways in which we can see some value here. The one thing that this company's been able to do is they've now been able to charge actually a higher price for their oil because they're doing it just in time. So if you think about the operators of these, malls or operators of these kind of oil change places, they don't have to, they don't have to pay for oil sitting there. They can just have it just in time, just when they need it. And for that, they're actually willing to pay a higher price because they don't have inventory just sitting there as it, basically not being used. So we thought we would just share that. This is an actual customer of ours. For me personally, I find this scenario and use case really interesting because this is using things like we've already seen today, things like IoT information, data, to drive basically use cases, to drive use cases, and then that drives kind of more this business model, both from an obvious business benefit, but also they're now moving to a different business model so that they can either, they can optimize their pricing a little more, and then they can be a lot more progressive in the way they come into the market. So just to kind of summarize and just a bit brief kind of recap of what we covered here. We really kind of there's 3 webinars, and over that course of the webinar, and for those of you that have seen all 3, I do thank you for kind of seeing all of that value chain develop. We started from things and just making sure connectivity makes sense, understanding how you kind of define that. We went into insights and really talking more along the lines of, contextualizing information, predictive information. What is good algorithm? What is a bad algorithm? All of those things. And now moving into action, which is really kind of our focus here, which is both, from a dashboard perspective, whether it be AR, and taking this information to an actionable thing that you can then either measure, you can, understand and evaluate, and then from there you can actually then pivot that into a new business model. A couple of quick things, and from a best practice perspective, we always recommend start small, learn and adjust. Be comfortable with not knowing the outcomes if you're looking at a new business model, because that's just back to what the McKinsey slide I showed earlier, that customers are kind of evaluating multiple use cases at the same time, and they're looking at seeing how that is fitting into their strategy, to the revenue model or the cost model they're looking to address. So start small, learn, adjust, right? And then as you move here and be comfortable not knowing where the end is going to be, but also understand that we can help you if this is something you want to move into, kind of understand and kind of, take a couple of steps forward to make sure that you're not kind of going into the most common things that we're seeing out in the market. Understand the landscape, understand that in some parts of your business, you may be more mature than others. You may be more focused on just connectivity in some parts of your business, whereas in other parts of your business, you may be more into the actionable insights portion of the value, right? The value chain. Or you may be looking at a very mature part of your business, where you're looking at service models and service excellence. So that, understanding where you are, understanding how you navigate, and understanding kind of where the next steps are depending on which part of the business you're kind of helping out. We can help, we can move from just a phase 1 where we help optimize, phase 2 where we have help contextualize, and phase 3, which is kind of some examples we showed you here today, is how to turn that into more of an innovation area and a business value conversation that you can have. Other than that, I want to just say thank you. We appreciate your spending the time with us today. I'm going to open it up now for questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you, Dimitri, as well. So we have a couple of questions. We'll try and get to most of them. So the first one is, what skills and resources are needed for outcome-based service? Do you need data scientists?
Is that a question for me?
Yes, that's for you, Michael.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. No, so it depends on how, the evolution of your organization is important. Understanding what skills and experience sets that you have and what capabilities you have internally is important to evaluate first. So I think this is actually a really good question, because we can bring, depending on the skills that are necessary, what we find is that we help organizations kind of get started. And then we can also help bring the maturity model of, whether it's on the data side, your IoT kind of understanding, the telemetry information that you have, normalizing your data, right, through to helping with things like predictive algorithms, determining whether you buy off the shelf, whether you create custom, all of those kind of conversations, does require understanding of the platform and the capabilities, and more importantly, and the pros and cons of each. But as your organization matures, maybe in the beginning, you may not have these skill sets. But as your organization matures, you may develop these skill sets. We would just simply be, potentially enabling your business to basically kind of go ahead and understand what skill sets you do need, what skill sets you want to invest in, and what skill sets you just want to leave your service providers for. Having that understanding is really kind of where we can help and where we can set you up for success.
Thank you so much, Michael. And then here's another question for you. So what are the biggest challenges you're seeing with customers that are trying to advance outcome-based service?
Sure. That's a broad question. If I was to just bucket it down to a few kind of key areas, and this is, of course, nothing applies to everyone's scenario, right? The idea, though, is that we were going to see kind of, patterns, and what we've seen is that the biggest issues that we find is data, number one, right? There's many elements of data that are, either, most people do know or think they know about how much data they have, how clean that data is, how normalized that data is, how reliable and, predictable that data is, right? So we find that a lot of those, unknowns and challenges really start right from the beginning of understanding your data. What do you have? How good is it? Right? Understanding that, that's something we can help with, but really understanding that and being able to kind of put that in a box and say, okay, this is good data, this is not so good data, this is great data, understanding to be able to slice your data and segment it out accordingly. Because that will then define, okay, based on this is the ones that we have good data on, maybe we start here. And from there, if you're working off of good data, then absolutely, then your path is much more direct. If you're working off of data that either you're not sure how good it is, you're not particularly aware of how you kind of came to this data, it could be historical data, we can help there, but that would entail things like, maybe creating simulations or creating kind of data that, is a good pattern to start with. But the idea there is that we would help you groom that information so that, again, set you up for the next step. So we find it's really the biggest challenge is the data. The next challenge as well is resources internally, people that know both the data and what we do with that data, how that data comes about, and also how to transform that data potentially. So those kinds of kind of resources internally are, is something another challenge that customers have. Probably the third biggest one is also being able to identify where it makes the most sense to invest. in, the next kind of iteration of service, whether, adding IoT, whether understanding whether augmented reality is going to be of value. So we can help with that as well. We can kind of bring kind of industry expertise, what we're seeing in other customers, and, count key pros and cons, decision points, all of those kind of, decision drivers to understand where it makes the most sense to invest. So just to summarize, it was a long way of answering the question. The data, the people, and where in the business, like how do I understand how to build value if I'm getting value from this investment.
Thank you, Michael, for answering that. And that's actually all the time we have for questions today. I just want to thank you so much to our audience for joining us today. If you submitted a question that we didn't get to, don't worry. We'll follow up with you by email shortly. And you could also look forward to receiving this presentation directly to your email inbox within 24 hours. So keep a lookout for that. And finally, a huge thank you and a round of applause for our speakers. Fantastic job, Michael and Dimitri. Please remember to leave feedback and suggestions for us in the survey at the close of this webinar. We'll use that feedback to guide us in producing upcoming webinar topics so we can keep giving you exactly the kind of content you want to see. So with that, I'll bring this program to an end. On behalf of Hitachi Solutions, Field Service, and the WBR Insights team here at Worldwide Business Research, thank you, and until next time.